All right.
We're here.
Yay! Well, we have to wait for Rob to
because they're stairs.
Stairs are hard.
We may be joined momentarily by Andrew Vallis, our art guy. According to your magic roll, it's time to go.
Yep, we're already 3 minutes in.
So Adventure Paths.
Let's introduce ourselves first.
Yeah, I'm James Jacobs. I'm the creative director and in charge of the half of the Adventure Paths that come out of Gen Con.
And I'm out of Daigle. I'm a developer at Paizo, and I work on the back matter, so the support articles, fiction, the bestiary in the back, pretty much anything that these guys don't do.
And I'm Rob McCreary, senior developer. I do the other half of the adventure paths. The one that Dave doesn't do, usually the one that comes out in February. I do the adventures, develop the adventures for that.
So we just are launching here at Gen Con the Iron Gods Adventure Path. Everybody have a chance to check that out? Which is one that there's been a couple of Adventure Paths, Jade Regent and Iron Gods, and there's another one that is not out yet. It will someday be out. It's not the one I'm going to announce that I've been wanting to do for a long, long, long time. Iron Gods is, of course, science fiction meets fantasy. And it's got the technology guide and the area book to go along with it. What we'll probably do is just go through a quick rundown of the next one after that, which is Giant Slayer, which we'll have Rob talk about in a little bit. And then after that, I will announce the one that is going to be launching next Gen Con. And unless you guys have anything else, I'll probably just turn it over to questions at that point.
It does say
people have questions. It does say Q&A, so yeah, you can ask questions. Wait. Yeah. Rob, tell us about Giant Slayer.
All right, so Giant Slayer comes out in February of 2015. It's about killing giants. That's why it's called Giant Slayer.
There will be spoilers, by the way.
Yeah, there will be spoilers. So the first one in February is called Battle of Blood Marsh Hill, and it starts off in Belkson. It's important to kind of point out that there's going to be a lot of orcs at the beginning, but it's not the orc AP, but giants are really tough and they're kind of hard right at the beginning, so we got some orc stuff starting out, but also there is some giant stuff as well, and that's written by Patrick Greeny, one of our developers at Paizo. That's followed up by The Hill Giant's Pledge by Larry Wilhelm. From there we go to, I should have prepared better, not to remember all the titles. From there we go to,
The Giant's Pledge. From that,
I don't have it complete.
The Giants, Valley of the Green Giant.
That's what it's not called.
It's not called that.
Forge of the Giant God. That's the third one, yes, which is a Valley with Giants and everything. And that is Tim Hitchcock is writing that one. From there we go to Ice Tomb of the Giant Queen by Jim Groves. And then Anvil of Fire by Sean K. Reynolds, formerly of Paizo. And we close it out with the final adventure, which is
Storm something.
Wow. That's the first panel of the day. So it's Castle of the Storm Tyrant?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. There's Storm Tyrant in there, and
you might have noticed a theme throughout some of this.
There's some like giant types. And that is by Tito Liati, so that'll be the sixth one, and it's basically going to be a lot of giant slaying. And kind of going back to, we've got kind of the crazy stuff with Iron Gods right now, so we kind of want to go back to basics with some just good old-fashioned giant slaying.
To try to make everyone happy. An impossible plan, but we're going to try.
So that's Giant Slayer.
Yeah, Giant Slayer. All right. Well, we can get questions in a minute. So after Giant Slayer, launching next year at Gen Con is the next adventure path that we're going to be doing. It's been kind of fun watching people on the message board try to guess what we're going to be doing. And certain people have been like stirring the pots. It's delightful and amazing and fun. I've mentioned something that it's going to be a familiar adventure path, but it's going somewhere new. This is also the adventure path where we're going to hit AP volume number 100, which is mind-boggling. But The first thing that we had to do there was decide what to do with the numbers on the spine, because we can't fit 3 digits. So Vic had an idea that we'd do a special fold-out cover that would fold out just enough so that you could see that extra 0 on the 100.
A little tab.
Yeah, it'd be a little tab that goes, but that was too complicated. So we're going to be rotating the numbers, I think, on the side, so they'll read vertically instead of horizontally, which will freak out everybody who wants all of their splines to look similar.
It's going to mess with us too.
Yeah, it'll mess with us too. We talked at one point, we never actually talked about widening the books to do that, because that gives us all the hives and the freakouts and the pass-outs. Anyway, so this Adventure Path, which is what, the 19th? No, 17th. 20th, it's actually the 20th one that Paizo has done, so that's kind of exciting. But
It was the 18th.
no, we did 3 with Dungeon Magazine.
No, but it was the 18th, not 17th.
It's the 18th?
I don't know.
It's the 17th.
I think these are the names.
Yeah,
Because number 100,
Anyway.
part 4 of the 17th AD.
This Adventure Path is going to be called Hell's Rebels. And it's going to be set in Cheliax. It's going to be set pretty much entirely in the town or city of Kintargo, which is up on the northern side of Cheliax. And it's really going to be, we wanted to do an Adventure Path that kind of, for the one that fell on the 100th volume, we wanted to do something that really felt Paizo. And we had a lot of different ideas of what to do. But Cheliax just feels really solid. I mean, it's the type of thing that people identify Paizo with. Maybe it's because they're devils and they're mean. Or, no, I think it's because they're cool. But anyway, so one of the things we also felt when we launched Pathfinder, we launched the Council of Thieves Adventure Path, which Wes and I really pushed forward on. It was like, oh, this is the one where Godfather meets the Omen. And so we got really into all of this supernatural Thieves Guild stuff. And I think we kind of misjudged what people wanted out of the Cheliax Adventure Path, which was a chance to fight against House Throne, which is a chance to rebel against House Throne. And we had a little bit of that in Council of Thieves, and it wasn't enough for people. So Hell's Rebels, as you can tell by the title, is the one where you basically are rebels in Cheliax and basically get to take over and claim the town of Kintargo as your own place. It takes place during the backdrop of an uprising all throughout Cheliax, so there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on in Cheliax. But this Adventure Path really focuses down hard on Kintargo, about the same amount as you see us focus on Corvosa, and it's actually kind of between Curse of the Grim Throne and Council of Thieves in how much it stays in the Kintargo area. So we've got all 6 adventure titles and all 6 of the authors panned out, and I did cheat. I used my magic phone.
Yeah, I should have done that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's got this thing called take notes.
No.
So, first one of these is called In Hell's Bright Shadow, and Crystal Fraser's writing that one. The second one, I guess I could do a little brief synopsis of each one of them too, so people can see what's going on.
Give too much away.
I won't give too much away. In Hell's Bright Shadow is the one where the player characters, a new guy comes to town to rule Kintargo. Barzillai Throne, who's a bad man. And in Hell's Bright Shadow, the player characters join this group called the Silver Ravens, who have a tie to the certain magic item that you're all familiar with, the Figuring of Wonders power. They use them to communicate. But they're basically Kintargo's rebel group. The second adventure is called Turn of the Torrent by Mike Shell. That's the one where... who may be intense. But Turn of the Torrent is basically the player characters at this point have started to build up the resistance group, and the Order of the Torrent, which is a small Hell Knight group, is stationed in Kintargo. And it's about how they are reacting to this type of thing and gaining a headquarters, basically. Third adventure is called Dance of the Damned. It's by Richard Pett. This one is basically you've got the resistance going, and you're trying to basically spread the word and all of that, and starting to fight against Cheliax and House Throne, and there's going to be a giant, I think, a masked ball where you have to invade and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot more role playing in this one than dungeon crawling. There will be dungeons, never fear. The fourth one, and this is volume 100, is called A Song of Silver, and I'm going to be writing that one. And it's going to be basically, that's the one where the player characters go into open warfare and take over Kintargo and claim it as their own. I'll have more to talk about number 100 in a minute here. Number 101 is called The Kintargo Contract, and that's going to be written by Jim Groves. And that's the point where players get a hold of this contract. It's some of the contract, as a portion of the contract that Queen Abigail first forged with Asmodeus, and they start finding loopholes and how they can handle basically fighting against Shellax. And the last one is called Breaking the Bones of Hell, and that's by Amber Scott, and that's going to have a section where you basically finish off, and if you do everything right, you can claim Cantargo as a free city. If you do everything wrong, it's bad news for everyone. But you do get to go into hell at some point during the adventure path. It's probably not a low level thing going on. Volume 100 will be, we're still sorting out the exactnesses of what's going on there. It's going to be longer than the other adventure paths by, I think, 120 pages. It's going to be 120 pages long, not 120 pages longer.
32 extra pages.
32 extra pages. It's going to have the article, or the adventure that I'm writing, it's going to have an article by Eric Mona, who you may have heard about. He's writing an article about Eridan. So we're going to have a lot of stuff there that's going to be talking about kind of historical information about Eridan and all that. The adventure itself takes place, a lot of the adventure takes place in the Cathedral of Asmodeus, which is a converted temple of Eridan. So there's going to be quite a few Eridan revelations there. We're not going to tell you how he died, but there'll be other surprises. There is also a 32-page article about, I forget what we're calling it.
We don't have a title for it.
We don't have a title for it yet, but it's
more
going
of
to be
a retrospective that looks back on all of the adventure paths that had come before.
So that's why
it
there's
introduces a new element that people can use if they're currently playing one of them or if they go back to replay.
It'll be like an NPC basically. That'll be themed to every adventure path. So like we were talking about, there's going to be a Van Caster that shows up in one of them. I'm not sure what, but another one of those guys or gals is going to show up, and it'll basically say if you run this adventure path, you can use this character to add in stuff. We're going to be using it to like as a cohort or as an enemy, and it's going to basically kind of be just a retrospective of the first 16 adventure paths up through and including Giant Swing. So,
and it's going to be written. Each one is going to be written by one of the authors of that adventure path from before. So I'm going to have to figure out how to fit all of that on the byline because that's going to be like 16 things or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about how we're going to fit stuff on this one that we're still figuring out, but we're going to make it work. The cover might have silver on it because it's a song of silver and we want to do something fancy. There's going to be a floor panel, I believe, map inside of it, kind of like we do with the modules. It'll have probably a battle map type presentation of like the biggest combat area inside where you fight the big bad guy or something like that. Maybe, we don't know yet. But it's going to be a map.
Those are some of the ideas.
No, they're pretty solid. We had other crazy ideas that we're actually decided we couldn't do, like what were some of them that were just outlandish? Oh, there's like a fold-out cover that would fold out 3 times, and then we realized that we wouldn't be able to afford that China with painting or something like that. Anyway, so it's going to be pretty exciting. You get basically a rebel against Cheliax, which is something people have been asking for a long time, and I guess that's that. Yeah, have anything you want to say about the back matter stuff?
The back matter for 100 was probably the...
I stole your thunder then.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It got said.
Okay, good. So, let's open it up for questions, I guess.
Could you go a little bit more? You don't have to try and come up with the names again, but could you go a little bit more for the arc of Giant Slayer, other than obviously we're killing giants? Like what's sort of the...
We haven't given that away yet, but I don't know if I want to give away the whole point of the adventure path, but there is basically a large giant threat. Well, I mean... It's humongous. No, there is one particular giant known as the Storm Tyrant. That's why the last one is the Shadow of the Storm Tyrant. That's right. Shadow of the Storm Tyrant is the 6th one. And he's basically gathering together a giant army of giants. And so it's kind of, but it's, as we said, they're spoilers. The PCs don't quite have the whole story right up from the beginning. So it's as the AP goes, you start to realize there's more and more. You start with some orcs and some giants, and you start finding out there's more things connected together. And you're basically trying to stop him because he can... we're talking about giants, right? So you can't really do a giant adventure path without a floating cloud castle, and with a floating cloud castle, that gives him perhaps a little bit of advantage where he can kind of threaten lots of different places. So this one isn't set like in one country like Cheliax or Numeria or something. It's a lot more, not as spread out, but it's more regional based instead of just one country, and that's why it becomes a big threat, because he can really threaten lots of different areas. So you're kind of, the PCs are kind of going to be working their way through and uncovering more and more of this conspiracy and doing what they can to stop him until they finally confront him. There will also be some, besides the Giants theme as well, there will also be some artifact themes going through this. You know, there's things.
More artifacts in this AP than I think any of you have done.
It might be. I mean, we've got some that are, you know, classic ones like the Hammer of Thunderbolts and the Orb of Dragonkind, and then we'll have a few new ones as well. So those will appear in this adventure path as well. So
and the Orb of Dragonkind also assumes that we'll be running into another popular creature.
I didn't say that. I don't know why you would. It might just be sitting on a table.
So if you want to like go read what the Orb of Dragonkind lets you do and what powers it grants you, fill in some of the blanks there.
The last time we dealt a lot in Pathfinder with a lot of giants was back in Rise of the Rune Lords. Will there be any callbacks to that?
We're not really going to call back to it as much. You may have noticed in my half-remembered title thing that I was giving, there was nothing that specifically talked about stone giants, really, and that's because in Rise of the Rune Lords we had, I can't remember that title now. Fortress of it was something of the stone giant to do that. So there will be stone giants in this adventure path, but not one really centered on them. But you know, it's also, there were a lot of giants in Rune Lords, but it was also really about this big evil wizard coming back. And this is not about a big evil wizard. This is about giants, and we're going to hit all of the classic giants, and some of the not so classic giants will also make appearances as well. So there'll definitely be, if you're playing Rangers and you want a good favorite enemy choice, I would recommend.
Dwarf Ranger is pretty solid.
There will be other things, of course, as well.
Yeah, it's really Giant Slayer is focusing in large part on the giants that we haven't done a lot with. So there's not going to be a lot of rune giants. There's not going to be a lot of stone giants. They show up in there here and there, but it's really more inspired by the Against the Giants back in the early days of D&D. But even beyond that, it's interesting how you guys got a giant in the first adventure, so I want to apologize beforehand for player characters who are killed. Being a person who's had a player character killed by Rob McCreary, I know what it feels like.
It's possible.
He's a harsh GM.
Yeah. He's not satisfied unless it's like, oh, that wasn't a tough encounter, no one died. Anyway, we love you, Rob. Yeah.
Any plans for more adventure paths that are compatible with the Mythic Adventure rules?
There are at least 2 mythic creatures in Mummy's Mask. There is elements of mythic rules in Iron Gods. But an adventure path that supposes characters are mythic is not something we have planned yet. We are just now starting to get a lot of feedback from Wrath of the Righteous and all that. And in a lot of ways, Wrath of the Righteous is really a difficult adventure path to pull off because the high-end stuff where you have high-level characters with a lot of mythic powers was kind of uncharted territory. And there was a lot of kind of guesswork going on there. And we learned a lot from that. One of the things I learned is that it's just really difficult, and I'm not sure what the demand is for. How many people in here would like another adventure path with mythic characters? So, I mean, I would like to, there's a couple of other ideas that are percolating in my head for what mythic adventure could be. I mean, the one where you go to fight a demon lord is the main reason I wanted to get mythic, and we did that in adventure path. But there are other stories we could tell involving mythic. I think before we try a mythic adventure path, I would really want to try to figure out a way to get a core first to 20th level adventure path into a 6th volume arc. And I don't know if that's possible just because of the laws of physics. But at this point, there's no plans to do another player character, mythic player character. We might do something maybe, I don't know. Not at this time.
Giant Slayer, is it going to be starting in, it's going to be starting in Belson, right? Is it going to be starting in Truda?
Come on. Answer questions.
True Now is on a hill in Belkson, and that hill is now named Bloodmarch Hill, and the title of the first adventure is Battle of Bloodmarch Hill, so that is a long way of saying yes.
Is there going to be any kingdom building stuff at all?
There's not in Giant Slayer. That's pretty much just
Giant Slayer.
In Hell's Rebels, there's probably, you've already got a city there that's pre-built, so you don't have to build a new city. That whole region of the northern part of Cheliax is kind of its own little area. There's going to be a little bit of exploration out there. There's going to be actually an element of underwater exploration in Hell's Rebels where you got to forge alliances with, because you can't hold up Cheliax on your own. You're going to need help from like the Strix. You're going to need help from the Aquatic Elves. You're going to need help from all sorts of other rebellious groups like the Desmonds who are fighting against Nadal in the Borderland. And so there's a lot of the city of Vire, which is just off the coast, is going to be something that you're going to be talking to. So there's going to be a lot of diplomacy type stuff going out. You're not really it's not going to really build off of the kingdom building elements. At this point, there's a very strong possibility there's going to be an organization building element there, which kind of in an ultimate campaign, you've got all the rules for building like organizations and taverns and all that type of stuff. So I'm looking into the possibility of having the player characters either building up the Silver Ravens, building up this rebel group and all their resources and all of that, and possibly through their actions over the course of these several adventures, they'll be able to change and develop the stat block actually for Kintargo. So they'll be able to like specialize, like if they want to make it a place with stronger laws or weaker laws or something like that. I'm not quite sure how that's all going to pan out, but we've been talking for a long time about doing another sort of kingdom building type adventure path, and we just haven't had the right time to do that again. We were one point thinking about doing a Skull and Shackles, and it's like, yeah, it's too much, it's too crazy. So we also are just coming off of like doing a mythic adventure path, an adventure path where we did science fiction meets fantasy, adventure path where you go to Earth and all over the different planets and stuff like that. And so it's really, there have been a lot of crazy stuff, and people really love what's been going on with that crazy stuff. But we really kind of are starting to do the next couple ones. We want to get really focused in on like kind of the classics and stuff like that. And with Hell's Rebels, focusing on some sort of a region of Cheliax and our world, you know, needs a lot more expansion and exploration. People will, I should say that. There will be other announcements about other support products coming out tomorrow in the future of Paizo. But beyond this one, the next adventure path is starting to go get in a little bit more experimental again. But it's like years in the future. So no.
This is probably a question you guys have gotten more than once, possibly here more than once. Way of the Wicked obviously showed that an evil AP could work. Have you guys ever considered something like an official one, or is that too far out of the normal realm of this is what
we're all playing? Rob is running Way of the Wicked right now for you and me and a couple of people. We love it, and we are on the Adventure Cut team.
We have a lot of different ideas. We just have to find the right times and places.
Because obviously an evil campaign is something that requires a lot of thought, a lot of work to pull off correctly.
If Lisa came to us and said, write down the next 10 adventure paths you have until the end of the week, we could probably, we have enough ideas.
That evil adventure path would be on that.
Okay, so 2018 we'll do that, and you know.
That's definitely something that we're all interested in. So, I mean, how many people in this room would love to see an evil adventure path?
Yeah.
Cool. Duly noted. Yeah. Interesting.
Beans.
All right. Any other questions?
On Hell's Rebels.
Yeah.
I know sometimes you can have unusual races in the old players guides. Will there be any support for, say, Strix PCs?
Strix PCs would make a lot of sense with this one, honestly, because the Strix have been kind of fighting against Cheliax for all along. Kintargo is pretty close to Devil's Perch in that area. There's going to be... we've already sent the covers off to the artist, and I believe one of the cover characters is a Strix. So Yeah, we haven't even thought about that yet, but I think that's a very strong possibility that we're going to try to figure a way out so that player characteristics would have a role in this adventure. It makes a lot of sense.
It'd be difficult for the city aspects.
It would be, because, I mean, part of the problem is the first several adventures is you're trying to be like kind of these low-key, under the counter type rebels. You don't want attention on you. And if you're like a Strix with wings and, you know, everybody knows that you hate Cheliax and all that, it's going to be tough for you to do that. So, it would be, it provides some challenge. And of course, the fact that they didn't fly makes them, you know, kind of, you know, break adventures up for the first two adventures. So it'll be tricky, but hopefully we can figure out a way out of it. At the very least, it'll be like, if you want to play Strix, talk to your GM, and then shovel it off on the GM to handle the... We do a lot of that. It's time honored. Bye, Rob. Rob will be back. Other question?
You're planning to do something for more works stuff?
More work stuff?
Yeah.
We've got...
goblins also around
goblins and stuff like that. Well, we pretty much got orcs and goblins kind of separated out. We've got in Iron God, there's not a lot of orc stuff going on. There's a fair amount of orcs and ratful type things going on, particularly in the second adventure. There's going to be a lot of orc stuff going on in the first, I think, two adventures for Giant Slayer. There's not a lot planned for goblins at this point. We talked at one point about doing something big with hobgoblins and stuff like that, so at some point we really do want to do something. Rob is really likes hobgoblins a lot and is going to try and figure out a way to do something with them. Eventually, yeah. I mean, one of the things that with goblins at this point is we've got goblins all over the place that to a certain extent feels like it's overkill, but I don't know if we can overkill those goblins. So it will probably be yeah, I don't know. Not immediately. There might be some goblin stuff showing up. There was certainly a little bit of goblin stuff showed up in the start of that, but as a big overall theme, probably not. We probably will do something more with kobolds, not necessarily in the adventure path itself. I mean, one of the tricky things with those guys is you could technically scale them all the way to 20th level, but it doesn't make sense to have like an entire adventure where you're fighting 16th level goblin barbarians and stuff like that. It's just in an in-world sense, there's nowhere for them to live to be that powerful. And we did actually, back in the Dungeon Magazine days, there an adventure called, I forget what it was called now, but it was one where there was this giant, like, house-sized toad that took over a tribe of orcs, and these orcs were all like 14th level barbarians, and it was a super high-level adventure where, you know, the high-level party goes and fights orcs, and it's kind of an experiment just to see if that could be done. And the adventure itself was something we could do, and the rules were all there. But in order to make those orcs tough, they all had to have like +3 swords and +4 bows and all this type of just crazy treasure. And in the end, it was like, how did a tribe of 100 orcs with 2 billion gold pieces worth of stuff, why are they out in the woods just doing that? Why didn't they buy a nation or something like that? So it kind of breaks down at a certain point when you get too much of that going on. So it's tricky, but goals are probably the next thing to see if doing something significant with that, I'm guessing at this point.
You kind of just answered this about Ratfolk, but at the end of last season of Pathfinder Society, they retired Asimar and Tiefling because we're moving away from that, but opened up Wei Yang and Ratfolk and Nagaji. Does that mean that we should expect to see those races in the next 2 adventure paths?
Not really. One of the big things they're doing there is they're trying to kind of vary, as far as I know, they're trying to vary just the character mix in Pathfinder Society. And I'm not honestly sure why they chose the Wei Yang. It was a Wei. I don't even know for sure what it is. They're kind of on the separate tack in the adventure path. So a lot of times you'll see the Pathfinder Society react to the adventure path and shift their storyline to follow along the adventure path. And we generally have, when we come up with new ideas, meetings and stuff where we sit down and try to figure things out. But that's not always a tried and true case. In this case, it's really just looking to expand it into different areas.
I love having the Wrath of the Righteous miniatures to go along with the adventure path. It's really cool to be able to pull out the actual monster, set it on the table, even if I do have to pay $40 for it on eBay to grab it. Can you guys comment at all on how adventure paths might tie in with some of the other minis lines, and what maybe some future minis lines might hold, and which paths might benefit from those?
That would be, they'll probably announcing a couple more of the miniatures upcoming in the Paizo 20. I forget when that seminar is. I should have checked that out. It's in here somewhere. We're doing a big preview of Paizo 2015 and beyond, and Lisa and Eric and all of them guys are in there, and they'll be announcing new minis expansions. We're moving away from simultaneous miniature and adventure path combinations because it's really when we start up the work on a miniatures line, we need to give all the art at the start. Whereas if we start an adventure path, we don't get the art until the very end for the last one. So it kind of ends up in a weird skew where you get the mini set, like the Wrath of the Righteous. A lot of the miniatures in there are from the first adventure. And you won't be seeing adventures for like the favorite of Discari, or Discari's avatar on Valerian is not one of the miniatures because he didn't exist at the time we had to place the order with WizKids. So it was really difficult to pull that off and sync it all up. So it's something that we tried a couple of times, and both times it was just super difficult. So we're moving toward a less of an adventure path theme, I guess, and more of just kind of a broader scope of minis lines. And I don't exactly know which ones are, because I've heard like 7 or 8 different possibilities bouncing around my head in meetings, and I don't know which ones they've decided on. So that's really something you'll have to either go to the next 2015 and beyond, or just once that seminar happens, it'll be all over again. Yep.
It's Saturday at 3.
What's that?
Saturday at 3.
Saturday at 3.
Oh, okay, Saturday at 3. Yeah, Saturday at 3 in this room. Show up and ask questions about upcoming miniatures, and they will answer what they want, and hopefully answer what you want. Yeah.
Is an adventure path centered on the big war between nations?
A big war between nations?
That'd be fun.
That would be fun. The trickiest thing with that is mass combat rules, and I'm not quite ready yet to say that we've got mass combat rules that are right for the game. We've got the mass combat rules we used in Kingmaker that ended up going into Ultimate Campaign, and those work for resolving like just fights and stuff like that. We've also got in Brandon's Adventure had rules for the troops.
Rasputin must die.
Actually had rules where you have like a troop of 16 or 20 or 22 or whatever groups, and those work really well for like small skirmishes. But an entire adventure path with a mass combat warfare type thing is something that I think would require a lot more robust system for mass combat. That's not something that we've got planned at this point. So I think what you saw us do with Wrath of the Righteous is as far as we'll go, as far as a big war adventure. It'll focus more on the characters. And that's really the problem I have with mass combat, is the game itself is so focused on your individual characters that anytime you shift away from that to do something like mass combat or the caravan rules for Jade Region or like the ship combat and Skull and Shackles, it gets really risky on timing how long the game is focusing on that element and away from your characters, and so it's tricky.
With the Giant Slayer one, you mentioned that it's tough for low-level parties to fight giants. So there's the first book is we're going to be fighting orcs, and there will be a giant in it. Have you considered for situations like this just starting the characters at a higher level?
We've talked about that kind of on and off. That's certainly starting at like 7th level or something would allow us to hit 20th level. But it's really difficult to do that type of thing because the way we do adventure passes, our first one sets up the storyline and we do our best to tie the characters in. So you'll see like our player's guides have all of these traits and stuff going in there. We'll say you need for Iron Gods, for example, if you aren't from the town of Torch where the first adventure takes place, you need to have a reason to be in Torch. It takes a lot of presuppositions in that. For something like Skull and Shackles, it was basically you got press games onto a boat. For Wrath of the Righteous, you are in a town that is attacked by creatures you can't fight and you fall into a hole. And so there's a lot of stuff that we do with the way that we build adventure paths that suppose a lot about your characters. And if we were to start an adventure path at 7th level, not only would we have to worry about the fact that a lot of people are not really into starting adventures at 7th level. They like this. I mean, I'm one of them. I prefer starting a character first level and going up. But we can't assume that your characters are X, Y, or Z because they're coming from somewhere at that point. So that's really something that causes a lot of just internal constraints to the way we build adventure paths. So that's not something necessarily that.
And not to mention, like, the first 3 volumes of an AP sell better than the last 3, so like people's interest in higher level stuff certainly drops off, and we've seen sales numbers that show that.
Yeah, and that might just be because people like get to the 3rd adventure path and then call it, or 3rd in a volume and decide it's not for them and all that. But it's really, there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, we've been doing adventure paths for, and like I said, we're starting at number 17 next year. And a lot of what we've learned through like tiny little steps along the way, and like, does this work, does that work, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. Something that enormous is not something we're really ready to risk on the event.
You had to pick one to run next. Mummy's Mask, Iron Gods, or Emerald Spire?
Iron Gods. Well, it's really, like I was saying earlier, Iron Gods, when we first started Pathfinder with only one Bert Hoffman's, we had that little gathered here in the back that talked about basically introducing the world to people. And at that point, I was like, oh, I want to go to Ninkai, so I put Amiga Fujitsu in that first adventure as kind of a preview for that. And I also wanted to go to Numeria for the very first issue, and knew that I couldn't go there until we had rules for laser guns and robots. And so it's taken, 10 years before we got to that one. And so I've been looking forward to the Iron Gods for forever. Mummy's Mask would be the one I want to play as a player, and in fact, I'm playing a player in right now. And haven't not been killed yet.
Hell's Rebels, will it be building or implementing any threads from the Prince of Rome, Council of Thieves, or the High Class novels?
Not really. It's really kind of focusing pretty hard on Kintargo. Kintargo's a place that if you go back to a lot of the stuff that I've developed or written, you'll see like little hints and pieces of Kintargo mentioned here and there. It's a region of Cheliax that I've been interested in developing for a long time, and have kind of been planning on doing something with this for a while. So we haven't really. It's kind of in an ecosystem of a subset of Cheliax.
Will Shensen be involved?
Yes. That's part of the power of being the creative director on the line. You get to decide if your characters that you've been playing show up in the adventure pass or all sorts of awesome, like whether or not they go on issue 100 of the cover maybe. Let's see how that works out.
I was wondering if you guys were going to do a path with time travel so you can see the other ages in Galarian.
So, one of the hardest things we've ever done was Jade Region, because in order to do Jade Region, we had to basically build a new campaign setting over in Team Shop. And that was just incredibly difficult to do because we all had to basically, well, I at least had to become an expert on all these Asian different cultures. Like we wanted not just Japan, but China and Korea and Indonesia and all of these different regions. We wanted to, do them right. And it was just a lot of work to get that all together. And a time travel adventure path is not just a new campaign setting, it's a new campaign era. I mean, you not only have to build a new map of the region, because the further back you go, the inner sea wasn't there at the time. And you get back too far, and it's like all of a sudden Cade Kalian's not an option. And so you have words stop being a thing you can do. And there's a lot of things that change when we go back. And it's something that we really, not only is it a lot of work, but once you start doing that, then you open it up to like the player characters demanding to change the future and all that. And we put too much work into the current modern adventure setting to really want to go back into the history. And it's just really, it's tricky. There are some ways that we tinker around with that. You see a little bit of it in the second Darkness adventure, the Armageddon Nectar, where there's kind of this time bubble type thing. You'll see a little bit more of this time dilation stuff going on in Eric Mona's level and Emerald Spire. So there will be periodically times where you can experience stuff from the past, but not necessarily in a time travel type of it. So in small bits, I guess.
Can we expect to see kind of like spiritual sequel AP like Shattered Star was for anything else in the future?
Yeah, eventually, yeah. I mean, Shattered Star was kind of an interesting one, and that is the only one that we assume takes place after any other adventure path. All the other adventure paths you can run in any order you want, and that's actually, we've had a lot of success with that type of thing, just getting people to not be overwhelmed by the different options and all that. But yeah, there's a couple of them that I would love to do sequels to. I mean, Rise of the Runelord story isn't done yet. There's more. We know what happened with Paizo. We know what happened with Krone through the Pathfinder Society. There's 5 more that could have something going on. So we'll see. We'll see how time plays out.
Do you think there's any possibility of higher res map images for the adventure pass in the world players?
What do you mean by high res?
I mean, like virtual tabletops, a lot of the map images that we get out of the APs, even for the map packs that we use today, don't necessarily scale to quite level where essentially the grading compression just doesn't work. Is there any opportunity to maybe sell higher res images of it as an add-on or something?
So that's something that we're working on. I mean, we've got our game space, our virtual tabletop at Paizo.com we're moving forward with, and the goal there is to have all those maps available in that area as basically as I believe free. I think the whole game space is all free. But actually high res so that you print it out and there's moving pixelation and all that. The problem there is that those maps start getting enormous sized, and as we move forward into the future, the capability for people to download and share and all of that, the higher res stuff does get easier and easier. So that restriction is going away. But we also have to order them from the cartographers at that resolution as well. And we basically, this is the size that we basically pay for a map. And if we zoom in, if we have like a giant map of a dungeon here, and we pay that sheet, we pay that size. But if we zoom it in and it's 50 of these, then we have to pay 50 times the amount. Because we're not going to ask the artist to build that scale. We're going to have to. We would want them to put in all the tables and playing cards. It's like we do with the flip maps. We want that level of detail on our maps. And figured out, I think Scarwell from Adventure Path 11, if we did it in that scale, it would cost, I think, $300 for that volume. And so it's a matter of cost and all of that stuff. So at this point, no, but every year that goes by, technology starts catching up with what we want to do. So, ask me again that next year, maybe we'll be in a better place. So hopefully, that's the eventual goal. It would be great to have that.
And just another question about maps. When my players are playing, a lot of times we feel a little cramped, I think, in some of the map adventures. It's more a comment than a question, really. But, there are lots of 20 by 20 rooms or, even 10 or 15-foot square rooms. And all the little miniatures get in there and the characters are in there fighting. And there's not a lot of tactical, maneuvering. And fights get a little more just like, I hit you with a sword, you hit me with a sword. So when the maps are a little bigger, the spaces are bigger, and there's more room to run around, let the wizard stand in the back, throw his fireballs, that kind of thing. But the players seem to have a little more fun with that.
Yeah, that's something that we do try to keep in mind. But again, the maps have to cover so many things. You have to fit them on the page. And
sorry.
And
my box cutter coming downstairs fell out of my pocket.
And so it's really tricky. It's also the same point. It's one of the things that I've often struggled with is making a dungeon into something that looks like, on one hand, be a place for a bunch of people that can move around and all of that, because it is on one level of simulation we're playing a miniature tactical game. But on the other hand, it's like if you're doing a map of a Thieves Guild, they're not going to want that much maneuverability. They're going to want to be all cramped in there. And so it's kind of like a constant tug of war in my head between what would be good for gameplay and what would be good for realism, for verisimilitude, and all of that.
So why does the Kobold have a 35-foot wide bedroom?
Exactly.
And in Giant Slayer, there's probably going to be this square equals 10 feet.
That's actually probably going to happen on a Giant Slayer because they're giants. They need a lot more room to move around in. Your player group is going to have a lot more room to move around in. And I think that might actually help out your group if you run that.
We just double the scale sometimes and it works fine. So.
What's, having done so many adventure paths now, what's the adventure path that's come out that you guys have been most surprised by the response to?
I can absolutely answer that one. Rain of Winter. I knew it was good, But with people reacting specifically to Rasputin Must Die, we knew we were going out on a limb, and we didn't know how many people we were going to drag out on that limb with us. And when you go back and read some of the reviews after it came out, with people saying, "I absolutely didn't want to like this, but I ended up liking it," it's like, success, thank you. That's a good feeling to know someone went into it not wanting to like it and then came out of it smiling. That's awesome.
Do you see the same thing happening with Iron Gods now?
I hope so.
Yeah, I honestly, I really hope so. I mean, it's been, the first one's got, I guess, several 5-star reviews already. Iron Gods exists pretty much because of Rasputin Must Die. If people didn't like Rasputin Must Die, we would have probably done Hell's Rebels instead of Iron Gods this year, or something else.
Do you think that Paizo will go generate on some space for spell jamming or something kind of similar or something?
At this point, we have Distant Worlds, which a lot of people are interested in Distant Worlds, like a planet hopping adventure pack. At some point, yeah, I personally am not a fan of the spell jamming mechanic. We've got other methods of traveling through space, like the Hell's Gates or Shantax or interplanetary teleportation. So it's possible. It's not something we got planned in the immediate future.
We should try wrapping up.
Yeah, we got maybe room for 2 more questions.
And Giant Slayer would have a wider scale, map in general. Would it probably be friendlier to mounted characters, possibly?
It would be friendlier to what?
For mounted characters.
It could be. I mean, it's not going to be 100% Giants 100% of the time. But I mean, I hadn't actually thought about that. And there will be inside places, but if they're at giant scale, mounted characters would certainly. I mean, there's still going to be some dungeons and stuff, but you might be able to maybe a little friendlier than normal dungeons would be, just because they're going to be at a larger scale.
Okay. Both of you. We'll do your 2 questions at the same time.
One thing I have is my group personally, I run for about 6 people. Is there something we could look forward to, like maybe an AP that focuses around more than 4 people as a base party start?
Really, the game is built for 4 characters, and everything is kind of. We tried the one that I tried that I can think of that was built for 6 characters was Scarlet Sun, Dawn of the Scarlet Sun, which was a short free adventure that we did several years ago, and part of the problem with that was that it was trying to meet too many masters at once. It had to be Pathfinder friendly, it had to be tie into Skull and Shackles, it had to tie into, it had to be 6 people, it had to do all this other stuff, and so I think that was sort of an unfair time to try that out, but it was certainly a tough thing to pull off, and we're seeing a lot of feedback from people that say that adventure is just way too deadly. And I think part of it was intended to be for 6 players, and a lot of people are not necessarily playing it for 6 players ever since, perhaps.
I think it's also a little bit easier to bump things up, because you can always add a few mooks or max out the hit points or something. And then if you're designing it for more players, then the people that want to do it, it's a lot harder to subtract things away from that. If you want to make like a 20th level foe to fight, you could sit there and say, well, I'll make them, I can't really go beyond 20th. You could do Mythic or something. Or if you had 15th, you could go up to 16th or 17th level, maybe add some things, maybe add some, mooks or something to go along with it. But if you've got like a CR17 NPC or something for 6 players, well, how do you reduce that down for 4? So it kind of leads us to doing it for 4 because it's the people. I'm running Mummy's Mask right now, and I'm running it for a group of. We have 6 characters plus your animal companion. So it's like I'm having to bump that up, but it's a lot easier than me trying to sit there if I was having to subtract everything away from that. So
it's starting to step out of our area of expertise, and not that far out, but far out enough that it starts making me just a little nervous on making sure that the game is balanced and that it's in an area where we know a baseline to be, because it's changing the baseline, so it gets kind of squirrely. You might want to try running a larger group or something like that with something like Round of the Righteous, and not make them mythic or slow down their mythic advancement. That could be one way. And really, the best thing to do is, like Rob was saying, is be willing to change things and be flexible on the fly and all of that. Yeah, I mean, how many people here have tables that have 6 people or more regularly?
How many of those are PFS games?
Okay. How many people have games that are 4 or less?
That's about half.
Okay, and that's something that
But it's a little bit easier to go up. Or
that's something that I think maybe we could look into and start figuring out maybe if there's a way to do that, or I don't know.
All right, we'll hit that last question.
Yeah, the Rise of the Rune Lords re-release came at a good time by them. It seemed to be exactly what was there. Is there a need for another re-release, and if so, are there plans for one?
So we did the reissue of Rise of the Rune Lords for the anniversary.
Yeah.
And that was a big reason we did that. It was a combination of the anniversary, and it was one that everybody loved. It was the first one we did. It was mostly out of print. So everything kind of hit the right combination. And if that combination hits again, I'm sure we'll do it again. I just don't know what that will be or when or where. I mean, we're coming up on the next anniversary, big 10-year anniversary or something like that pretty soon. So
another 5 years.
Another 5 years or whatever. It's something possible. I mean,
2 years of plans, because of 2 years of Pathfinder.
how many people would like to see? I mean, one of the things, before I ask that question, one of the things is it's always made us a little nervous about compiling those and offering them as hardcover versions, because we don't want to set a precedent that that's the preferred way for customers to buy those products, because it's really difficult for us to even as successful as Paizo's become, putting that much art and time and effort and resources into one book that just hits once rather than hits. I mean, just as it's easier for somebody to buy 10 volumes at $10, it's easier for them to buy that instead of one volume at $100. It's kind of the way that the industry works and the way our subscription setup works. So it really makes that reflowing element important to us. So it's got to be something really special that is out of print, and the timing has to be right. And I don't think it's going to be right for another couple of years, but in another couple of years maybe we'll see. So I think we're pretty much.
We've got a panel coming in 5 minutes after this.
Thank you, everybody.